So I'll start out a little bit about how my film Searching for Timbuktu came to be. It really started as an outgrowth of my pursuit of a master's degree at the University at Albany. One of the great perks of working at a university is that you often get to take classes for free. And so I decided that at my tender age, that I would try to take advantage of that benefit and pursue a master's degree in documentary filmmaking. And that started in roughly 2015, 2016. And I took a research seminar, and you have to produce a paper out of that. And I was introduced to this topic by my advisor, who said, you know, there's this story about this Black settlement that was in the Adirondacks and in the mid-19th century, and you should look into it. I was given an introduction to Martha Swan, who perhaps many of you know is the executive director of the nonprofit organization John Brown Lives. She then put me in touch with Amy Godine, who is really, I think, the expert on this topic. She's amazing, and anything I can do to promote Amy Godine and her good work. In fact, I believe this year she's coming out with a book called The Black Woods, which is about this very topic. And so Amy gave me some great material to work with. I then found Dr. Hadley Kruczek-Aaron, who's an archaeologist at SUNY-Potsdam, who's been looking for this Black settlement for more than 10 years. And I was fortunate enough to be able to film her and her team as they embarked on their latest expedition in the field at John Brown Farm State Historic Site. And then also Norman Dan, who wrote a book about Gerrit Smith. It's called Practical Dreamer. There is a subtitle, which I can't remember at the moment, but it's a great account of Gerrit Smith, who I can't believe that many New Yorkers, few New Yorkers know anything about him. He was such a huge figure of his time and important not only to New York, but to the nation, and somehow slipped into obscurity. And so to the extent that this film can help remind folks of the great contribution, even though he was a complex man, you know, the great history and contributions that he made to New York, and the value of this story, because I think there are many themes in this story that resonate still today. And in fact, we're still grappling with many of the same issues that Gerrit Smith and John Brown and Frederick Douglass and the Black settlers of Timbuktu grappled with in 1846, where we find ourselves as a country still trying to wrestle with those issues. And you know, this film doesn't offer solutions per se, but I hope that it provides perspective in that, you know, people can pull together to find solutions to problems that maybe that have been hounding us for some time. So, you know, what I'd like to do is I'd like to share the trailer. It's only about 1.5 minutes long, and that will give you a good kind of overview of the story. And then I'll launch into a little bit more detail for you and a little bit of presentation. I'll show you some photos, and then we can kick into questions. So I will attempt, I am not a Zoom expert. Even though I do work with video for a living, you'd think this would be easy. I will give it my best shot here to share this screen and make sure my audio is up. Here we go. Share sound. This one here. Share. Aaron, can you see this screen? I can see you, so you're the only one who can confirm for me that it's up there.
It's up. I can see it. Thank you.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to turn up the volume here.
In the heart of the Adirondack Mountains of upstate New York, in a remote and dense forest, lies a buried secret that archaeologist Dr. Hadley Kruczek-Aaron, Dr. K.A. for short, has been trying to dig up.
The forest is coming in and encroaching upon this clearing.
Somewhere here are the remains of a Black settlement established as a bold social reform experiment that grew out of one man's act of generosity. Called Timbuktu by some, the settlement brought together a diverse group willing to make extraordinary sacrifices for the causes of land and liberty. It led one man to the brink of insanity, sent another to the gallows, and helped hurtle the nation toward a catastrophic civil war. Shrouded by time, buried by dirt, this little-known settlement connects to prominent people and pivotal moments in our nation's history with a team of research assistants and students. Dr. K.A. is on a mission to find it.
So there we have, excuse me, just make sure I can get out to the screen here. So there you have the trailer for the film, and I think it kind of lays out the fact that Gerrit Smith, who was born in Utica in 1797, he was born into a family of wealth. His father, Peter Smith, was a fur trapper, and when Peter Smith was young, he was a young fur trapper, penniless, nearly penniless, and he partnered with another person to kind of go into this business with. The person he partnered with was also equally poor at the time. His name was John Jacob Astor, and of course, he went on to become the first multimillionaire in the United States. And so between Peter Smith and Astor, they were able to build this kind of fur trading business and capitalize themselves a little bit. And as Peter Smith moved on into real estate and their partnership kind of broke up and they went their separate ways, Peter Smith was able to purchase a lot of land in upstate New York, and there were various ways that came about. But the family owned at one time, I believe it was upwards of 200,000, 250,000 acres of land throughout upstate New York. They were one of the largest landholding families in New York. And that's how they came into their wealth, was through real estate. And Gerrit Smith, though, wanted nothing to do with his family's business. He wanted to, he was dreaming of becoming a lawyer as he was studying at Hamilton College. And when he graduated in 1818, that's what he wanted to do. He didn't have a very good relationship with his father. In fact, they did not really like each other, though he really loved his mother. He had a fantastic relationship with his mother. When Gerrit Smith graduated from Hamilton College, he graduated as the valedictorian of his class. And shortly after graduation, in fact, I believe it might have been even the day after graduation, his mother died. And that was a huge blow to the Smith family, not only to Gerrit, but also to Peter Smith, who did, adore his wife. So that was a very big blow. But it was just kind of the first in a series of blows that the Smith family had to endure. Gerrit Smith married his college sweetheart, who happened to be the daughter of the president of the university, of the college. And some 7 or 8 months later, within the year of them being married, she dies. So within a year, he loses his mother and his newlywed wife. And that was kind of, that's hard for anyone to endure. It's important to note too that at around this time, Central New York is being kind of engulfed in this religious revivalism. It's what results in the region being called the burned over district. And so Peter Smith gets tired of his business interests and decides he wants to leave. This religious revivalism, it kind of takes over his life. And he decides, I'm getting out of this. And he turns to Gerrit Smith, his son, and says, you have to run the family business. Now, Gerrit Smith did have other siblings. One of his siblings was did not have the capacity to to kind of really take care of himself, much less, let alone the family business. Garrett, seeing the situation, relented. He really had no choice but to take over the family business, which he does. And that's how he comes into possession of all the family land. And there's much more to his story, his personal story, but I'll kind of jump forward a little bit. He sees the religious revivalism going on around him. He eventually does remarry, and his second wife, Anne Fitzhugh, is very religious and kind of pushes Gerrit Smith to embrace religion a little bit more, which he does. And he's seeing the religious revivalism around him. He's seeing the kind of the moral issues surrounding him and plaguing the nation. And he starts to think about, what can he do to help? And he knows he has all this wealth, and he realizes that maybe there's something that he can do there, do something with it to matter. As it happens, in 1846, the New York State Convention, at the New York State Constitutional Convention, the voters upheld a voting restriction that basically discriminated against Black males. In order to vote at the time, of course, women couldn't vote, but in order for Black males to vote, they had to own at least $250 worth of property. That basically disenfranchised most Black males. No one else was subject to this discriminatory voting restriction. So Gerrit Smith looks at the situation. He says, well, I can give away land to 3,000 Black males so that they can have the right to vote. And this is kind of something that he's kind of always had in his mind, doing something with the land, somehow ridding himself of the burden of this land. I should also note that during this time, among the issues is kind of land monopoly that is being contested, especially up and down the Hudson River Valley area, especially here outside Albany, with the wealthy landowning families like the Van Rensselaers. There was a movement called the anti-rent wars, where people were organizing against what they believed to be kind of onerous rents that they had to pay to these landowning families. And so he's mindful, Gerrit Smith is mindful of that. In fact, he's called out in a newspaper, a pretty widespread newspaper, as a land monopolist. And he goes on record saying that he believes that, a person should only have one farm, despite the fact that he's got, hundreds of thousands of acres. So he knows that, people are charging him with being a land monopolist himself. So 1846 comes along, the New York State Constitutional Convention. He decides, I'm going to give away 40 acres of land to 3,000 Black males so that they can have the right to vote. I'm going to pull up a couple of photos here as we talk, because I think it will help illuminate some of my presentation here. So right now you should be able to see some press photos on my website that will help us tell the story. So if I click here, you'll see Gerrit Smith. This is him. I mean, there are quite a number of photographs of Gerrit Smith, because he loomed large. He was a pretty well-known figure, not only for his wealth, but for the causes that he undertook. Among them was, obviously abolitionism, but temperance, the temperance movement. Despite the fact that as a college student, as many college students do, experiment with drinking, he did as a young man, but then went on to embrace a temperate lifestyle. And owing to the fact that he also had some health issues that plagued him most of his life. So Gerrit Smith, I'm gonna move forward. This is John Brown Farm State Historic Site, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with, just outside Lake Placid. And you know, I'm originally from Chicago, and I married into a New York family. My wife is from New Hartford, New York, which is just outside Utica. And once we started having children, we decided to move to Albany and be near family. But for 15 years, we would drive past John Brown's farm, and I would just note, like, oh, well, I guess John Brown must have lived here. But I never stopped to think, why did he live here? What brought him here? And that is what the film sets out to answer. And it's in a fascinating a beautiful place, obviously, kind of in the shadow of the Olympic ski jump tower. That's it. There's the tower right there in the background. You can see. There is the Searching for Timbuktu exhibit is in the barn space here at the farm. So I do encourage you to get out to the farm and look at the exhibit. It tells the story with these wonderful panels that Amy Godine curated, and I think John Brown Lives helped fund to put together and produce. So that's going to be there. And at some point, some of the film will be at the exhibit as well. This is Dr. Hadley Kruczek-Aaron right there in the center with some of her students, and they're digging at John Brown Farm. And that was in 2017 when I went out to film them on a month-long dig. And that is an unusual access that they were given to be able to dig at that prominent historic site. And so while she wasn't specifically looking for Timbuktu on that dig, she's looking for material culture of the Browns that perhaps could lead to more information, generate more leads to finding Timbuktu. As I mentioned, she's been looking for it for more than 10 years. I think she may have started in 2009, perhaps, but she's fantastic and really does a great job in the film, kind of walking us through where some of these Black settlers may have been, and kind of the challenges that they faced settling the land out there, in the wild Adirondacks in the mid 1800s. It was, it's a pretty formidable place now, but I can only imagine how challenging it would have been to try to forge a life in the frontier then. It's remarkable. This gives you a sense of it, right? I actually took this photo from the top of the Olympic ski jump complex, and I wanted to intentionally show kind of what you might have been up against. Of course, there in the lower right of the photo is the barn structure on John Brown's farm, but you can imagine this being, 1846, and you're having to settle a patch of land somewhere in there and eke out a living with perhaps a family in tow, young children, and your mother-in-law and your wife, as is the case for several of the Black settlers at North Elba here. So this photo, I think, does a good job of giving us, a little bit of a sense of what that might have been like to be there in that wilderness. And it's a beautiful land, but also, I would say, a challenging place to make your living. Even in the wintertime now, I mean, Saranac Lake always ranks as one of the coldest places in the winter in the US. And so, obviously this isn't far from there. And it's remarkable. And there is a story in the film about one settler who has to go up against the brutal winter there. This is me filming, I think in 2017 as well. That's a top Whiteface Mountain there at, and it's, again, being from Chicago, which is where I'm originally from, I'm in love. I love New York. I love upstate New York. I never pictured myself living here. I wouldn't have been able to tell you that upstate New York even existed, except, New York City. But what a fantastic place to live and raise a family. You're 2 hours from the Adirondacks, 2.5 hours from Manhattan, Boston, Montreal. I really love it here. And though you can take the boy out of Chicago, but you can't take Chicago out of the boy. But what a great place this is to live. So this is a close-up of the land book that Gerrit Smith, when I said that he wanted to find 3,000 Black males to give these 40 acres of land to, well, he had to enlist the help of Black leaders all across New York to help reach these Black families. And when he did, I'm going to actually skip forward here. This is a wide shot so that you can see this book that was carried by one of the land agents, and I'm blanking on the name of which agent this was, Charles B. Ray, who's the publisher of an African-American newspaper called The Colored American at the time. And each of the land agents would carry these books across New York State and enlist people. Hey, Gerrit Smith is giving away 40 acres of your own land. And you know, it was positioned as a way to elevate the race, that land ownership was the key to equality and freedom. And so these Black land agents fanned out across New York to enlist people. And as you can see in a close-up here, you can actually see the city. You can see Harlem spelled out right here and right up here. And I don't know if you can see my arrow, but right up here, Harlem. And, you know, people from Rochester to Troy, Albany, to Harlem, Astoria, New York, signed up for these parcels of land. And in just a year's time, as Amy Godine says in the film, in less than a year's time, they were able to get these 3,000 lots signed up for. And let me try and move back here. So you can see this, just a little detail that Gerrit Smith of Peterborough, it basically walks you through kind of the boilerplate at the top of the book. And you can see all the names in the counties where people were deeded. So the lot numbers in the counties where they were deeded. So the story about this book, though, that I'm holding, this historical artifact, this is 150 some years old, it was just moldering away in basically a bookshelf on the 39th floor, might have been the 36th floor of Corning Tower here in Albany. Now, it wasn't protected. It was just there among other books in a kind of a glorified closet, really, in, you know, an office building in downtown Albany. Now, that would be like, and I said this yesterday on our practice call, that would be like, you know, you go to the DMV and you go to the break room, and underneath the photocopy machine is, you know, the first Constitution of New York State. Or, so I'm being a little facetious, but it is like that this historical document was just kind of stored someplace. Not even, I don't even want to use the word stored, but was nearly forgotten had it not been for a person who came to see me speak at a different event a couple of years ago and said, hey, I think we have one of these books. Now, this book, the office that it was in was the Office of General Services of New York State, which, you know, does the land surveying. So it makes sense that that book would have ended up there, but it makes more sense that it would end up in the New York State Archives so that it could be properly protected and maintained so that another 150 years, people can look back and see it. So I think as a result of that, I mean, look at me, I'm holding that thing and I'm not even wearing gloves, which I know I should be. And the funny thing is if you look at this picture and you look right down beneath me, there were these little scraps of the book that were, it's so brittle right now that when you turn the page, little pieces of it would fall off. And there's a little plastic bag, if you look to the right of the photo there, I decided to scrape up those little pieces of the book and put them in that plastic bag so that I'd have a little memento of this historic artifact. And so it's sitting at home on my desk. And sometimes I forget that, like, I look at this plastic bag and think like, what is this? And nearly toss it. So I've got to label it or something. So, but it's good to know that that thing is that book, and who knows how many, where all the other books are that the land agents kept. I'm sure some of them are in the Gerrit Smith archives at Syracuse University. There's some 10,000 pieces of 10,000 letters and correspondence that are there from Gerrit Smith's time. So perhaps I know that some books are there, but I think not all of the books are accounted for. And so who knows? Maybe one is under the photocopy machine at the DMV, who knows? So this is Dr. Alice Green, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with Dr. Alice Green, but she's a civil rights and social justice activist here in New York, and she narrates part of the film. And the reason why I chose Dr. Green is because she grew up as one of few Blacks in the Adirondacks. I forget, I think she might have grown up in, I want to say Keysville, but maybe that's not right. There's maybe it's Mariah or Minerva. It was someplace where there was mining. She grew up there, and she was one of the few African Americans there. And when I told her about this story, she was blown away. She had never heard of this history of this Black settlement that was started. And so she, I enlisted her to be the historical narrator. There are actually two narrators in the film: the historical narrator who takes us back in the past, and then a present day narrator who's actually David Gastina from WAMC Radio. He does a great job of helping us narrate the archaeological dig. So there are two kind of unfolding narratives at the same time. This is Congressman Paul D. Tonko, who actually provides the voice for Gerrit Smith. The reason why I chose Congressman Tonko, or I asked Congressman Tonko to voice this, is because Garrett Smith served as a US Congressman. He served one term and decided that it wasn't for him. And, there was too much political gridlock, and that sounds familiar, right? And he decided that he could do more good from his land office in Peterborough, New York, than he could do in Washington, D.C. And so he actually never wanted to be a politician, and Norman Dan, who's the author of that book I mentioned, talks about it so eloquently that Gerrit Smith didn't want to be a politician, but the people nominated him anyway, and he got elected. So he goes to Congress. So I thought it would be neat to have a sitting congressman provide the voice of a historical congressman. And that's just the title art for the film. So I'll stop the share there. So it's a tremendous story. I love discovering forgotten history or complex characters, people whose stories have kind of disappeared. And what I also do love about this story is that it does illuminate the fact that an area, the Adirondacks, were peopled by a lot of different kinds of people, and that African American settlers were there, at a time when the nation was contending with racial equality, so I think it's an interesting story to tell, and I hope that I've done it justice. I'm looking forward to. The film is slated to air on WMHT, the local PBS station, in June, early June. We're still kind of working out some things, and I've got to get some other things squared away about the film before we can broadcast it. In addition, an 8-minute version of the film will be on display at the New York State Museum, I think in April, this spring. I don't want to give a date, but it will be part of the Adirondack Hall exhibit. We're just, in fact, just last night, I was putting the finishing touches on that 8-minute version of the 1-hour film, which is not an easy thing to do, to cut a 1-hour film down to 8 minutes, but somehow I was able to do it. So if you can go to the New York State Museum and get a little taste of it, and then you can tune in to WMHT in June. I don't know if WMHT reaches all the way up there, but we are trying to see if it's possible for the film to air on all local PBS stations in New York on the same day, so that people would be able to experience it. We're trying to see if we can time it for Juneteenth, which is June 19th, but it wouldn't air on June 19th. It would air a few days before. So if you really want to follow information, I'm just going to share my screen one more time. You can go to go to my website here and I'll show you. It's TimbuctooFilm.com. And then if you scroll down, you can sign up here for an email, and that way you'll know the upcoming information on screenings and other talks that I might be giving in the area. In fact, I know I'll be up in Lake Placid in, I can't remember the day. I think it's June, early June. And I will also be in Peterborough, which is named for Peter Smith, Gerrit Smith's father. It's also where the National Abolition Hall of Fame is, which is run by Norman Dan, who wrote the book and is in the film. I'll be actually screening the film there. I think I'm screening that March 5th, Peterborough, New York. That should be on the website. So happy to take questions. I don't know how you want to do this, Aaron. If I haven't been in the chat, so I don't know what the questions are. And
yeah, we have. Thank you so much, Paul. This was great. I feel like I want to take a whole course on this topic. We have a lot of questions and a really engaged audience, which is wonderful. I'm going to try to group them on theme. In terms of where the land was, there was one question that was why 40 acres? Does that relate to the land being worth $250? And then there were a lot of questions about where the land was. Was it in, primarily on land in Essex and Franklin counties? But do you have any more specificity? So I'll ask that, and then there's
sure. So I asked that very same question about the 40 acres. Why the 40 acres? Because remember, this precedes the whole 40 acres and a mule thing that came out of Reconstruction, right? So in a lot of ways, and I kind of hint at this in the film, Garrett Smith, in a lot of ways, it could be argued. I'm not saying I'm arguing it, but this precedes by 20 something years, 40 acres and a mule, right? That comes out of Reconstruction. So where does that come from? Does it come from Gerrit Smith? He serves in Congress, and he serves with the very architects of the Reconstruction plan. I think it was Thaddeus Stevens, and I forget at the moment, but Charles Sumner, maybe. He serves with the same congressmen who are putting together the Reconstruction plan. So maybe it's possible, right, that Gerrit Smith says, like, back in 1846, I gave away 40 acres of land to African Americans. Maybe that's a model for Reconstruction. I haven't found any historians who have found that connection, so we can't claim that. But it's interesting to note that Gerrit Smith did it already 25 years before Reconstruction. What Amy Godine says is that was a pretty common, like 40 acres was a pretty common, like plot size, I guess. At the time, I'm not a surveyor or historical, know much about historical surveying, but that also is, it could just be that it's a very common number in terms of plot sizes. So hopefully that answered it a little bit. In terms of the counties, yeah, Franklin and Essex County primarily were a lot of where this deeded land were, but it did, I think someone did mention Vermontville. I think that's true too. In the book, you can actually, I see that someone asked, is there a digitized version of the land book? And there is actually at the New York State Archives. And so I was holding that beautiful original document with all the signatures, which is amazing to see. But if you go to the New York State Archives, they have basically, if you can imagine, a dot matrix version of that land book. It's not as cool, but you can read everything. It's like looking through, I don't know, something from the 80s where it's all printed out on a dot matrix printer. But yes, there is a digitized version, not digitized where you see the original signatures, but kind of transcribed, where you could flip through and see all of the counties and all of the lots and all of the names. What was interesting was, so I have actually, as it goes, on my desk right here, you're not going to be able to see this mug. There it is. It's from Sing Sing Correctional Facility in Ossining, New York, right? I got it because I did a video there in another job, in another life. But when I was flipping through that land book, I saw names from Sing Sing, not Ossining, but from Sing Sing. And I'm thinking to myself, like, how, I don't know that the people were in the prison. I can't say that they were. Maybe Ossining was referred to as Sing Sing back in the day, but I remember thinking, like, what? That's crazy. Because I used to live just down the road from there in North Tarrytown, which is called Sleepy Hollow now. So what other questions?
Well, there's some questions about kind of the families that lived there. Did they vote? How long were they there in terms of, surviving the winters? So there was a question about, did they register to vote, and was there a social impact on that? And then another question about, did the experiment work? And then kind of relatedly, what's the Black population of the area today, and are there families that you know of who are even still here, descendants?
That's a great question. In terms of did they vote? I don't know the answer to that. And the person who probably knows better is Amy Godine. And if you ever get a chance to ever see a talk with Amy Godine, go. She is just one of the smartest people I've ever met. And she has such a great storytelling vibe about her. So that is fantastic. In terms of, did the experiment work? I guess it depends on what your metrics are. If your metrics are, did people stay on the land and for generations, then if that's the metric, then probably not. But if the metric is, did it provide a message of social justice and equality? I think from that standpoint, look, this made the news all across the country that Gerrit Smith was doing this. And the fact that when John Brown heard of this Black settlement, particularly the one in Lake Placid in North Elba, he saw it as an incredible opportunity. Now, he saw it as an incredible opportunity for different reasons. He had long held this kind of desire to invade the South and destabilize slavery. And he had this whole plan of using the Alleghenies, using forts and hideaways in the Alleghenies up through the Adirondacks and being able to shuttle people from, the South to the North to freedom in Canada. So when he heard of Gerrit Smith's land grants, that is what I argue in the film, that is one of the things that attracted him to this. So he goes to Gerrit Smith and says, I will help my Black neighbors here. I will help these Black brothers and sisters farm the land if you sell me a plot of land near them, which Gerrit Smith does. That's how John Brown ends up. That's why his farm is where it is. It's only a mile away from the Black settlers. In fact, I'm going to share my screen one more time to give you a sense of the map here. Let's see if I go here, share. You should be looking at a Google map here. Right here is John Brown's farm, right? Just to give you a sense of bearing, right here is the Lake Placid Olympic ski jumping complex. There's John Brown's farm. Timbuctoo is settled somewhere in, here. So one of the settlers, his name is Lyman Epps. And there's a road here called Bear Cub Lane that goes right, you can see it here, just plunging right into the forest. That's where, somewhere back in here, I don't know exactly where, is where Dr. Kruczek-Aaron has been looking. The land that was deeded to Lyman Epps, one of the Black settlers from Troy, New York, who brings his family up, is somewhere here. And she's been looking for it. He's a critical figure in the film. He was also probably the closest Black settler to John Brown's family. In fact, I'll get into that in a second, but you can see that like this road basically here, it turns into this dirt road that goes into the forest. Now, again, we looked at, you can look at that and say, wow, how did we've got this cultivated field here now, but that wasn't there then. You know, how was Lyman Epps able to grow corn and other crops there, like in this rocky soil? It's an amazing sort of story. What I wanted to say in terms of the families, many of the families that actually took up plots of land come from Troy and Albany. Troy specifically, they come from and a lot of them are parishioners at a church called the Liberty Street Presbyterian Church, which is run by Reverend Henry Highland Garnett, who's a fascinating figure. And you know, part of me is thinking that he's worth doing a documentary on as well. Got 20 ideas that I just can't get. But a lot of the families that take up land, at least in this area, come from the Troy and Albany area, as opposed to maybe downstate New York. Another thing that happened that prevented a lot of families, I should say, some families from taking up their plots were, you know, some people were given their plots and they would go up and, you know, kind of unscrupulous existing residents, their white neighbors, would lead them to the wrong plot. They would lead them to a plot of land that was underwater or overly rocky and say like, yeah, this is your land, and but I'll take it off your hands if you don't want it for a couple of dollars on the, or pennies on the dollar. And some people would give up their land, thinking like, I can't do anything with this, and would hand over this land. And you know, there's some cases, or there's some anecdotes of that, I should say. And a lot of other cases, settlers who were granted land didn't keep up with the taxes, and so the land reverted back to the state and then was auctioned off. So that happened. You know, but there are families who stayed. In particular, the Lyman Epps family stayed for nearly 100 years there in the area. In fact, if I back up the Google map, well, I won't share it again, but just down the road from the John Brown Farm site is the North Elba Cemetery. And you can go there and you can see the Epps family plots all laid out there. It's really, I mean, so in a way you could say that they're still there, you know. So, you know, was it a success in the sense that, you know, it populated the Adirondacks and people came out and exercised their vote? A lot of people say, no, it wasn't successful in that fact. But I think that, you know, the fact that John Brown doesn't raid Harper's Ferry, Virginia, or at least that gets delayed for a long time, if not for Timbuktu. A lot of historians say that John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry, Virginia is one of the catalysts for the Civil War. So here we have this plot of land in upstate New York, you know, settled by Black settlers as a gift from a wealthy white abolitionist, tracks John Brown. John Brown comes, he stays for a little bit and decides to go off to Kansas, really, and fight, and then comes back and goes to conduct his raid, which is connected so directly to the Civil War. I think you can make a case that that settlement, Timbuktu, plays a role in the larger story of the Civil War. It's just that people don't know about it. So,
as they don't know much about lots of things relating to Black history.
right.
We have a few different people asking about where and the name Timbuktu comes from. Why that name? So
obviously there's I think it's a 15th century African city, you know, known for its architectural and agricultural prowess, right? So that in and of itself was a reason that a lot of at the time, a lot of communities in New York and New Jersey were named Timbuktu, probably in reference to that fabled African city. What I've discovered is that 20 years before the North Elba Timbuktu, there's a Timbuktu in New Jersey, a town settled by Black settlers. I'm trying to learn more about that and show them, you know, the Timbuktu in upstate New York. But there are several settlements called Timbuktu. The only thing I can think is that it's paying homage to this other city.
There's a couple questions about, I can tell we have historians in the audience, in terms of the documentation relating to the land and whether there's deeds, whether there was a survey done of the land. I think a lot of people want to go try to find these. There's a lot of searching for Timbuktu and the interest in the audience.
If I'm going to try and pull up while I'm talking to you, I'm going to try and pull up my email real quick, because in terms of the surveying, yes, there is, I've got to think of this guy's name here who sent me this email. There it is, Gerrit Smith. Let me try and pull up. So I'll share my screen once again. So here I was sent Garrett Smith, Essex County Deeds. You can see there's some documentation. Oops, how come that didn't? There you go. This is some written, I don't know if you can call them legally deeds, but written correspondences to settlers from Gerrit Smith or his signatories about the different lots. And they're kind of hard to read in this PDF. But if I click over here, you can see here's the Jefferson and Henderson and Epps lots. It's kind of hard to see. I wonder if I can zoom in a little bit for you. There we go. Now these green squares represent, I think, the person who sent it to me, where some of these lots were. I can't read a survey map, so I'm kind of lost here. But you can kind of get a sense of, this is a Thorn survey, and I think this is I think it might be in the archives of New York State Archives, so you might be able to find this there. Let me see, what else do I have here? This one, let's see if I can blow it up for you. This, I guess it's the same, it's a different version of the Thorns survey, which somewhere on here has Lyman Epps's, it's kind of the outline of his lot. Oh, there it is. It's right over here. I don't see, if you could see my, it says Epps 40-acre lot private. So again, I directionally challenged. I can't read this map, but there it is right over here in the corner. And this is a survey from, I can't read the year. Sorry, can't read the year, but I'm happy to share it with someone if anyone's interested, or you can look it up on let me see what he said in the email here. Oh, here it is. That was dated 1847. So November 1st, 1847, and filed in 1849. So here's a little bit. I'm happy to put this in the chat. I can copy this a little bit. Essex County Deeds, Township 12, Old Military Tract. So I'll see if I can copy this and throw it in the chat and see if anyone wants to kind of pursue that. Oh, this says host and panelists. I'll do it to everyone. There we go. Happy hunting.
Well, thank you.
I hope someone does, because the other question was about descendants. And so I did interview a woman who now lives in Newton, Massachusetts. Her name, she wrote an article in an Adirondack magazine. I forget, it might have been Adirondack Life, or I forget the name of the magazine, but she wrote about this settlement, and her great grandparents who were deeded land by Gerrit Smith, and she drove out, I think, to find that lot. I could find her grandmother, great-great-grandmother, in the directory for Troy, New York. I couldn't find that woman's spouse, and I couldn't, because there was no deed, I couldn't find it. So I couldn't put her in the film because I couldn't substantiate it, even though I'm certain that she's telling the truth. I forget her name, Catherine Butler Jones is her name. And she's great. Without being able to substantiate, I couldn't put her in. It was hard. So if anyone finds it, I'll make a new version. I'll put her in, and I'll put you in the credits.
Well, I think I know I would have fun looking through the county deed records to try to find out. And along those lines, I think this might be one of our last questions, is somebody interested in what about volunteering? Is there any opportunities for anyone in the audience here tonight or others who might want to volunteer with the effort? Any suggestions for what they should do?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, I know that Dr. Hadley Kruczek-Aaron is always looking for funding so that she could go back out and do these digs. So she's a great person. She teaches at SUNY-Potsdam. If you wanted to reach out, maybe I think occasionally she does invite the community out to help with archaeological digs or something like that. So you can reach out to Hadley Kruczek-Aaron at SUNY-Potsdam. I think she's the chair of the archaeology department, so easy to find. I see someone did see Catherine Butler-Jones spoke at Russell Sage. Yeah, she's a great woman. She's a little bit frail now and kind of, has a little bit trouble remembering all the details when I interviewed her, but really fantastic.
Wonderful. And then you kind of touched on this, but there have been a couple questions about the current percentage of the population in these counties that is Black,
Someone did just have a figure. So we did a talk at the New York State Writers Institute in November, and someone had a figure for the Black population in the Adirondacks. Now, I don't know it off the top of my head. Obviously, it's not huge, but it's not nothing.
Right.
And I think I love the Adirondacks, and like I said, I love upstate New York. I think it's one of the best places to live in America. I think I feel privileged to be here, and I thank all of you folks for having me here to be able to talk about it. And I hope if this is your home state, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much. And any questions that didn't get answered, we'll try to find some answers. But I think we've got it all. And thank you all for coming. I see we have a UU social justice team in the audience. That's
cool.
Fabulous.
That's awesome.
Very cool. And
sign up for the email, and you'll know about other screenings. And there's one in Lake Placid, like I said. I'll make sure it gets in the calendar on the website. And when the film airs, I would have loved to have shown it to you tonight. It's probably better to watch it on TV though.
Yes, and we'll publicize. So we have everybody's contact information. So once we get word on when it's going to air, we'll definitely share it with this group, and we'll also share some links both to your film and then more information about this project. And everybody, thank you so much. If you enjoyed this presentation and wish to contribute to AARCH in support of these projects, we have lots of thank yous, which is great. We have links in our chat for that, and we appreciate everybody's support, and we appreciate everybody's membership. And Paul, just thank you so much. This was such a fascinating presentation.
Thank you, and really thank you for the gift of your time, everyone. I appreciate it, and stay safe and warm.
Well, thank you. Have a lovely night, everybody. Stay warm. Paul, have a great night. Thank you so much for your time. This was a true gift.
Yeah,
all right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.